Good morning. Today's demonstration is on how to create texture on your relief sculpture. So I went around the room this morning when class started and asked what kind of textures people needed. Obviously one is going to be fur. Another one is going to be feathers. And another one is going to be a starfish texture. We have all types of tools to help us. We have a fettling knife, loop tool, flat-headed and round loop tool, X-Acto blade. This gets detailed cuts, and a needle tool. The first one I'm going to start with is fur. Fur is, I would say, the easiest. No matter what texture you're going to create, what I would suggest is that you make your cuts or make your texture a little deeper or a little bit more obvious than you actually want it to look in the final product. The reason being is because after these are finished, we're going to bisque fire them, and then we're going to apply glaze. Glaze has a thickness. So what's going to happen is part of your texture is going to be filled. So if you have, say, a nose, you know a dog's nose, how it's kind of dappled, it's not totally smooth? You would want to, believe it or not, create a stipple, something like this, on the surface of that nose. Now, let's pretend that the nose is a satin black color. Well, we have to have an actual glaze that's called satin black. So once this is bisqued, you could pick satin black and cover the nose area with satin black, and this would actually look like a very subtle texture because that glaze would fill the holes. Does that make sense? Okay. For fur, I'm going to use my needle tool just like the nose texture. And the thing with the fur is you want to create fur that is in the direction that it's going on the animal's face. So what exactly does that mean? On this cat's head, the fur is going upward. Shoot, glare. That doesn't work very well. There we go. The fur is going upward. On the sides of the face, it goes sideways. So you're actually going to replicate those lines on your sculpture in the direction that the fur is laying. So whatever direction the fur is laying, that's the direction that you want to create the lines with your needle tool. Something like whiskers, in order to create an area for whiskers, take your needle tool and wiggle it around so you make a hole that's about 3 times larger than your needle tool. Because you know what we're going to do? You know what the best whiskers are made from? Fishing line. Fishing line, super cool. So in that, what happens to the clay is the clay dries and it shrinks a little. We bisque fire it and it shrinks up to 10%. So we need room in the holes for the whiskers we need room for a little bit of glue in the thickness of the fishing line. Does that make sense? Okay. And then, so again, when you create the holes, you're not just going to stab. And this is for anybody that has whiskers on their sculpture. Really, really cool looking. You make the hole about 3 times bigger than the width of your needle tool. So this knows how to make fur texture and how to make holes for whiskers for an animal. Let's talk about bird feathers. If this is the body of your bird, you want to cut with your knife upward marks. Just like this. This will give a nice texture for your feathers, and this edge, the bottom, you want to work from the bottom up, so then the feathers will look like the top feathers are laying on top of the bottom feathers. Another thing you can do for larger feathers is use a loop tool, and you can do it on the same actual sculpture. As you move up the face of your sculpture, again from the bottom up, always go from the bottom up. This works well for fins on a fish too. And now I'm giving this demonstration just for ideas. Please feel free to experiment with your own texture making. Unless every single bit of your sculpture is smooth, like, say, a shark, if there's, on your sculpture, if there is texture, you're required to put texture on your sculpture. Now, this this feather texture is going to look beautiful with some blue and green glaze on it to replicate this little bird here. The last one is Starfish. I'm going to just mold one leg of this starfish. Before adding texture on something like a starfish, you want to make sure that you have a pretty regular and smooth surface, because this is a different type of texture. This is the type of texture where you're going to be adding on that three-dimensional quality. The texture is so large and so regular that you're better off adding it on. Okay, so this represents one of these legs on the starfish. What I would suggest is that you have a friend who's maybe finished early, sit with you, and make little balls of clay. We're always going to be in a situation where some people are done early and some people are not. So the people that are done early, I would like to help with something like this, not actually touching the sculpture, but just making something that is sort of a task to help someone who has something that's like repetitive like this. Make little balls. Okay. And then in the top part, as you get to the top part of the sculpture up here, the balls are a little larger. And what you're going to do is stick these balls of clay on your sculpture. This will just look amazing, filled with glaze. Absolutely amazing. Here it might look like it's just a bunch of petals, or rather pebbles, but when it's filled, when the creases are filled with glaze, it'll really look beautiful. The other thing that'll happen is, and you'll learn more about this when we talk about glaze, any raised areas you can make a lighter color than the recessed areas. You just wipe off some of the brown, in this case like a brown glaze, and then put a clear over it, and it will really look like a beautiful transition. Really beautiful. So you would just continue adding these on. And again, this is a situation where you can have a friend who's done early, or just, matter of fact, anyone in the room, maybe, even better, maybe it's someone that you can get to know that you don't know. Roll these little balls for you while you put them on. Then as you get lower, they get really small. And what you can do is leave a regular or an even amount of negative space between these little balls of clay. Super, super cool when it's glazed. One thing I want you to start thinking about is that glaze is 50% of this project as far as the end result. Really, the color makes it. And here's the bottom edge. Again, for the bottom edge, you really want to make that negative space regular. Or leave it the same amount of negative space between each little spike around the outline. Super cool. I'm actually really having fun doing this. And that's my video on how to apply texture.